Let's talk for a minute about the anchor. In Hebrews 6, verses 17 through 20, we read, "So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." There's a lot in there, but let's start trying to at least break it down a little bit. We see that God cannot lie. And this God who cannot lie has made a promise, or a covenant for one thing. And he's made an oath, or he has sworn. God has done this second thing. And here we are, and those of old as well. This person is representing those of old and Christians of new. And there's a curtain that was referred to and talked about things that were behind that curtain. And it said that we have a hope that enters into that curtain or behind it. And it talked about what was behind that was an anchor, that it was an anchor for us. And that, of course, was the inner place of old, the Holy of Holies. And this is where we see that Jesus Christ has gone. He's a forerunner who's went there, and he's our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So there's a little mental picture of what all's being said here, that God has done two things that gives us a hope that is like an anchor, strong, sure, steadfast. Christ is back there. He's went before us, and this should be of great encouragement to us. We see here that when we talk about that first thing, let's look at the two things Jesus did, or God did. In Genesis 15, 9 through 18, looking at the promise, Genesis 15, 9 through 18, he said to him, "Bring me a heifer." This is talking to Abraham, 3 years old, a female goat, 3 years old, a ram, 3 years old, turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other, but he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. The Lord said to Abraham, "Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that's not theirs, and will be servants there, and they'll be afflicted for 400 years. I'll bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they'll come out with great possessions." We skip a few verses there. It says, "When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, 'To your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates.'" So we see what is a covenant here, or a promise. And what's interesting, for those of you who might never studied that word before, it's in a sense of cutting, is what the original word comes for this covenant. A compact's being made and passing between the pieces of flesh. And that's what happened in that verse. God had him bring these animals and sever them, and all but the birds, and he passed through that midst. It talked about a torch, or a light flame, and it talked about a smoking pot, and these things passed through the midst of that. This was God showing that sign by this cutting. And it's not in this lesson, but of course that shows the importance of circumcision and this cutting, and how that was a symbol of things like unto this. But God didn't stop there, did he? We go on in Genesis 22, verses 15 to 18, "And the angel of the Lord called to Abram a second time from heaven, said, Behold, by myself I've sworn. By myself I've sworn, declares the Lord, because you've done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, as the sand that's on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." So God here, a few chapters later, has sworn to Abram. And we see That's from a word, and this is interesting too. So notice this in the last year, to be complete, thorough, to seven oneself. Isn't that an interesting phrase? And we know seven was a number that symbolized things in the Bible, but it's as if to swear or say seven times, as if that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And since God could swear by none greater, none greater, it says that he swore by himself. We swear by a higher thing is what people try to do when they swear. And God, there was nothing higher he could go to by himself. So these are the two things, the great things that God wants you to have confidence that there's an anchor that you can hang to in the problems of life.